Good evening, dear students. This is Mr. Abdurrahman with another session that is designated for business studies subject for the IGCC level. Today's topic is going to be divided actually into two videos or into two parts. We'll talk about the concept of the cash flow. We need to distinguish the cash flow concept. And first, this part, we'll talk about the importance of the cash flow, and after we talk about the importance of the cash flow, we will jump into something referred to as a cash flow forecast. We will talk about the forecast, how it helps the managers manage the business better. After that, we'll talk about something else. We'll talk about the idea or the consequences of running short of cash flow and how it's dealt with to solve these problems regarding cash flow. After that, we will summarize and conclude the topic with the talking about the importance of the working capital. So first thing first, we'll talk about the idea of the importance of the cash flow. This is gonna be huge. I'm gonna head the arrow there at this point. The importance of the cash flow. Why the cash is important actually? Cash is considered as one of the assets of any business, and we called it. It's called liquid asset. We start doing some highlighting. Cash referred to as liquid asset in any business, and it enable you as a business owner or as an entrepreneur to spend on immediately on the available goods and services, whether that is something that you want to buy or something that you want to sell, and the cash will be in and out. We'll talk about the concept of the inflow, the cash inflow, and the cash outflow. But first, things first. So this is the first point that I need to mention here. Cash is referred to as a liquid asset, and as I said, this liquid asset is available anytime for spending. This is the idea. Any business owner, they should have cash available so they can do whatever they want for the business, and mainly it's some sort it basically it's some sort of spending. And as I said, most of the time, if you're running into some kind of store and you wanted to buy some good, and you discover that you don't have that amount of money at that specific point of time, that's considered as being short of cash. So, also beside that, if you're a business owner, for example, and you needed to borrow some money, so borrowing money or not being able at that period of time is considered as running out of cash. So the cash, it's called the cash flow problem. Cash flow problem happens when run out of money to buy something, or to buy, let's say, goods or something else. This is it's called the cash flow problem. Cash flow as a meaning, so from our understanding, cash flow is considered as a flow of money. Cash flow is a flow of money into, out of business over a period of time. So this is as a simple definition for the cash flow. It's any kind of money or the flow of the money into and out of the business over a period of time. We'll define it here. I'm gonna do some definition here. So this is for the cash flow, and will lead us to something else. We talk about the Cash inflow. Cash inflow is the sum of money actually received by business at any at a certain period of time. This is the cash inflow because the cash can be divided into two things. It can be divided into the concept of cash inflow and cash outflow. Beside that, we'll talk about cash outflow as a definition. Cash outflow is basically the same as inflow, but it's talking about the idea of outflow is the sum of money that is paid out, paid out, paid out by a business at a certain period of time. So this is two slide quick definitions. So cash inflow and the cash outflow. And this is the definition of the cash flow. As I said, cash flow can be divided into two things. It can be cash inflow and can be cash outflow. Of course, there's a problems. There is a majority of problems that might happen due to that. And most of the time, when we talk about cash inflow or cash flow as a concept, problems, it will lead to a set of problems. These problems can be described in a short way here. These problems regarding the lack or being short of cash flow. Number one, lead making the business unable to pay for who? For workers, for suppliers, etc. That kind of a thing. Beside that, the production of the goods or the services that you're making as a business can be affected too. It means that the production of goods or goods or services may stop due to that because you're running out of cash. Why is that might stop? Because to explain it as example, workers refuse to work without getting paid, because one of the things that the cash flow is providing is this kind of things, the short-term payments as an example. Beside that, the business might be forced to sell everything to which is referred to as liquidation. Business might be forced into liquidation. Liquidation is standing for selling assets, business assets to pay debts. Basically, this is what it's referred to as liquidation. So all these considered as uh, problems that might happen to any business when they are running out of cash. uh, Now we will talk about the idea or the meaning of the cash flow, how the cash flow uh, or the cash inflow, what's the meaning of it? I mean, if I want to describe it here, we talked about the problems. Now I'm going to talk about the concept of the meaning of the cash inflow and the cash outflow. Here I'm going to talk about cash inflow forms or meaning. What is the meanings of cash inflow forms? uh, there's mainly five common forms to describe as a cash inflow. One of them is the sale of products. You're selling the products to get some cash, and this cash getting into the business, which is considered as a cash inflow. Besides the sale of products, also the payment that is made by the debtors or the debtors. Debtors are the customers who are purchasing your product, but with the use of credit card, it's like a delayed payment. Okay, so the payment made by developers. Also, borrowing money from external sources like banks. Okay, is considered as some sort of cash that will flow into the business. Okay, but as we know, the loans will be repaid eventually. Another example for the cash inflow is the investors. No, sorry, we'll talk about the sale of the assets. If you're selling the assets of a business to get some money, like unwanted property, is considered as a cash inflow example. And beside that, the investors. The last example of cash inflow is the investors themselves. Any kind of money that will be invested by the shareholders, in case of companies, of course. This money will be, it's a sort of finance, but as this money start paying for the expenses of the business, it's becoming a cash inflow. So these are the five main main forms. Number one, the sales of products. Secondly, payment made made by debtors. Borrowing money from external source. Example for that, loans. After that, we said that the sale of assets, unwanted. Example for that, unwanted property. And the investors. They are the investors. Example for that, when shareholders put money into business. These are the five forms these are the five forms of cash inflow. I said number one, sales of product. Two, payment made by debtors, borrowing money from banks, for example. The sale of the assets like unwanted machines or whatever it is, and the money coming from the investors. So five cash inflow forms. Let's talk about the cash outflow. Here. The cash outflow form. As examples of the outflow or the cash of outflow, there's actually simply we'll talk about two of them. One of them is purchasing the goods or the materials. When you're purchasing goods or materials for your production process, it's considered as cash outflow. And beside that, paying salaries, wages is considered as other expenses. So, first example is, as I said, purchasing materials, goods for production, and beside that, paying wages, salaries, and that's considered as examples of the cash outflow 1 and 2. Okay. Beside them, also purchasing fixed assets. Let's say that you're buying some fixed assets for your business. It's not about the materials or the production. We're talking about purchasing whole buildings for your business. Remember, we were talking about the fixed assets. It's another example for the need, or it's some sort. It's another example for the outflow or the cash outflow form. Also, repaying, when we said that the in when you're taking the loan, it's considered as a cash inflow, but as you repay for the bank, it's considered as a outflow. Repay a loan is another example. And lastly, paying to creditors. When you say creditors, we're talking about other firms who supplying you with items that is needed. Creditors like suppliers, as an example. Paying to creditors. This is example when you are not paying immediately. Sometimes the supplier will give you something, they will give you what you need, but you will pay after a period of time. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These are 5 forms, guys, of cash inflow, and these are the 5 forms of the cash outflow or meanings. Okay, let's jump into another discussion. Let's talk about the cycle itself, or the cycle of the cash flow. There is some sort of cycle here need to be understood. The cycle of the cash flow. Cash flow flow cycle. What is the cycle of the cash flow is? It's a repeated process with a certain pattern, and we're gonna define it here. What is the cash flow cycle before drawing it? It's these stages between paying out cash for things like, example, labor, materials, and receiving cash from sale of goods. So the starting point of the cash flow cycle is when you are paying for your labor and for the materials to produce until the point where you receive the cash from selling the goods of your production. This is the production cycle as a definition. We'll try to summarize it here. So first, it's divided into few stages, 5 of them. Stage number 1, stage number 2, stage number 3, and then stage number 4, and lastly stage number 5. And after 5, the process will go back to the first stage here. So this is stage number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What is about the first stage here? What do we need to know about the first stage? First stage is about when cash needed to pay. So this is about the first point or the first stage here. It's when the cash is needed to pay for things. And after that, stage number 2. Stage number 2 talking about the concept of when the materials will be purchased, when the labor will be giving money as salaries. So this is talking about materials. Purchasing material. I'm gonna zoom in here so you can see purchasing materials, paying wages to labor, etc. This is about the point number 2. After that, we jump into stage number 3. Stage number 3 is talking about the production itself, the actual production process. Goods being produced. This is stage number 3. And in stage 4, draw it properly here. Square itself. Stage number 4 is about the sales of the goods after producing. Of course, it's gonna be sales, goods or services sales. This is stage number 4. And lastly, after the sale or being sold, at stage 5 is the collection of the cash or the cash payment received. You will sell. Here is stage 4, between the stage 4 and 5. It's 4 is about selling the product. But 5 is about collecting that cash into the the revenue or reserves of the business. Cash payment received. So uh, these five steps keep repeating in any business, and we call them cash flow cycle. And as I explained it in this diagram, is consists of the first stage here. In this first stage, it happens when you pay for the essential material, when you need the cash, and after the need the cash, you need to pay for the essential materials required to produce the product. And as the production is starting the process, after that, the product when it's finished, you will start offering this for the customers, and the sale of these products can be in cash or can be in credit, as you know. After that, stage number 5, when this cash payment is received in actually by the money by the business, um, and this money, of course, after the receiving this money will be injected again in the business. It might be used, part of it or whole of it, to repeat the cycle. So this is about the cycle of cash flow. Just one thing to add here as a highlight. Just one thing to add to the cash flow cycle. Need to mention one thing. The longer cycle is taken to complete, the greater the firm's need for working capital. So if you spend so much time, it means that the working capital will run short. So if it's not taking longer, it means that you don't have any problem with your working capital or cash. So this is about the cash flow cycle, guys. Uh, Now let's jump into something else. We'll talk about. Also, we will continue talking about this diagram. Just to highlight a few notes here, just to tell you some scenarios that might happen. This diagram, or the purpose of this diagram. What is the purpose? Purpose of the diagram of cash flow cycle. It helps you planning. It helps planning cash flow. Helps planning cash flow. This is the purpose of it. In case, I'm gonna give some examples. In case of first case, if a business don't have enough cash, let's say that you don't have, for example, not enough cash at stage 1. This will lead to what? If you don't have cash at stage 1, it means that your business, you cannot provide the materials required, and you cannot purchase it, and so the output and the sales will fall. So this will lead to not unable unable to purchase materials needed, which lead to no output. And if there is no output, it means that sales will fall. This is the first scenario might happen. That's why the cycle or the life cycle. That's why it's important to plan for your cash flow. And another example, let's say that stage four issue, stage four. Let's say that you don't have a stage four. A business that insists that the customer pay the cash. Stage four. Insist business. I would say business insist that customers pay only in cash because they have poor planning for their cash flow. This will lead to something. You will lose your customers to competitors. So, may lose customers to other competitors. This is the effect. You see how it's affecting without having a proper cash flow. In stage one will lead to some kind of consequences, and stage four will lead to another consequences. Beside that, guys, the business might, if it faces some inefficient cash for paying the bills like electricity or rent, this will lead to liquidity crisis, and it might force the business to uh, to buy or to sell its own assets to pay for the credits. So these some kind of examples. I'm gonna write example number three. No efficient cash to pay for electricity. This will lead to what? Force it to pay for creditors by selling business assets. This is some examples to explain the purpose or for making a proper cash flow planning. Cash flow planning will help you avoid such such scenarios. Just to demonstrate the idea that the managers need to plan ahead always regarding the cash needs of a business. It's a good decision to be able, as a business owner, to do that. Let's jump into something else, guys. We'll talk about the the concept of cash, or will lead to another point. I need to mention it here. After we talked about all of that, I need to distinguish something, guys. I need to understand something from our discussion today. For cash, this is another point here. I'm gonna jump in here, find some space to talk about the idea of the difference between how to distinguish between cash, profit, revenue, that kind of things. First of all, guys, just to put it as a meme, cash is different from profit. I'm gonna zoom in. Cash is different from profit, guys. It's not the same thing. How come? How to explain to do that? So, let's say, for example, that you have some kind of profit, just to profit, guys, to distinguish. Now you know what the cash is, but profit is a surplus amount of money after total cost subtracted from sales revenue. So this is something you should know by now as a business student. Cash is different from the profit. Profit is a surplus amount of money after getting the cost out of the sales revenue. Uh, we're gonna do some sketching here to explain it in another way. Say that I have a business, some kind of company, and we estimated some financial record from them. They are selling with an amount of, let's say, 50,000. 50,000 is the amount of money that they're getting as total for sales. So it's like revenue. Let's consider it as revenue. Rev. And the cost for these goods, it was like 10,000. 10,000 was the cost of making this product or these products. To be able to distinguish between the profit and the cash, we need to do some calculation here. Let's say that I want to make the profit of that month. So to be able to find the profit, by the way, these 50,000 here, guys, just to so you understand the trick, these 50,000 as a revenue, 50% of them paid in cash. Okay, 50% paid in cash, while 50% with the use of credit card. Okay, because this is needed to understand how to calculate. If you want to calculate the sale revenue here, I'm going to say that if you want to calculate the profit from this, basically we'll take what, as we said, you're gonna subtract what? The sale revenue. We said the sale revenue. Where's the sale revenue here? It's the 50,000. 50,000 minus the cost of these goods, and the cost we said that is 10,000. Means that the profit is something around what? What do you think? Is it correct? It's gonna be like 40,000 profit. This is the profit. Okay, 40,000. We subtract the revenue and the cost from the revenue to come up with the profit. Let's assume that the business in that month started with no cash, and you want to calculate the cash by the end of the month. So how to calculate it here? This is the other thing. We're gonna do something. We're gonna say net cash flow. How to calculate it? What do you think? The net cash flow is gonna be equal to what? It's gonna be equal to the. You remember when we said the outflow and the inflow? It's basically the cash inflow minus cash outflow. Okay, so the profit is calculated. Now we're going to calculate the net cash flow. We said that net cash flow is gonna be subtracting the outflow as expenses from the inflow. How it's calculated? It's gonna be equal to what? What do you think that the cash inflow is? You see the revenue, it's 50,000. Can you tell me what is the cash inflow here? The cash inflow, guys, is gonna be this. This is the cash inflow. Cash inflow is the 50% paid in cash. 50% of the 50,000, it means that it's gonna be 25,000. This 25,000 will be divided from the cash outflow. What is the cash outflow? Remember, cash outflow, guys. Just gonna, it's the cost actually. Cost. Remember, anything that you spend going out. So 25 will be minus 50,000 or 10,000. 10,000. This is how you calculate the net cash flow, which is gonna be equal to 15,000. This is your net cash flow. It's gonna be 15,000. This is how you calculate it. Now you see the difference. 50,000, guys, it's not the same as 40,000. You see, profit is different from the cash flow. I just needed to explain this to you to distinguish between the concept of cash and the concept of profit. Okay, so the profit is something and the cash flow is something. Okay, just to add some discussion to this, we'll do some discussion here from this. Some questions. I'm gonna add some questions and some points here. You're gonna say, Mr. Why is the cash is always lower than the profit? Why? This is question. Why cash always less than profit? Which is a good question. This is the question, and the answer to that is that because that the goods, even after selling the goods, guys, the cash payment received is only the half of them. So this is the answer. Cash was received is half of the payment because other half because 50% paid in credit. That's why it's less. Another question with this. So this is the answer for this question. Other question, guys, as I said, can a profitable business run out of cash? Can a successful business run out of cash? The answer for that is yes, because the major reason for business failing is something called insolvency. Insolvency is about not being able to pay your the things that you're responsible of. Okay, the answer to this is yes, due to insolvency. Sorry, insolvency. Sometimes it's successful, but you ends up being bankrupted because you cannot pay your debts and you cannot pay in time for wherever you are. And why is that? Question. Why insolvency happens? This answer, there's a variety of factors that might lead to that, of running out of money, is sometimes you're allowing your customers too long to pay with the credit period. So it's like they're spending. There's a long time before uh, getting the payment using the credit. So it will encourage sales purchase. You're trying to encourage the sales purchasing by allowing them to use credit, but you will end up by um, being out of cash. And secondly, sometimes you might be expanding so much. So the first reason may why insolvency happen. First reason, due to long credit period. You're offering a long period to pay for credit. Also, another answer for this is that you are maybe expanding so much, expanding so fast as business, and since you're expanding quickly, uh, you might be keeping some kind of high inventory level. Example for that, uh, high inventory level available, which leads to massive cost for that inventory. And remember, inventory is costing money in the modern economy or the business concepts. And since you're paying so much for it, you might be ending up running out of cash. And this concept is different from the insolvency. Okay, so insolvency can happen because of uh, paying uh, the paying with credit taking long, or by paying so much for high expenses for the inventory. It's referred to as over trading. This is referred to as over trading concept. Over trading is talking about the idea that you have high levels of inventory for your business, and you will end up running out of cash. So this is the first part. We're not gonna talk about the cash flow forecast here. It's on the part two, but just to do some highlighting here. This is the question number one: why cash less than profit? And question number two: why the profitable business can run out of cash? We said that there is a variety of reasons, mainly the insolvency, and after that we said why the insolvency happens of a variety of reasons. This is a reason one, and this is reason two. So guys, this is our topic. Mainly we talked about the cash flow concept. So that's it for the first part of the cash flow, guys. As usual, I want to thank you for viewing, and I will see you in part two and another video sessions. Take care, guys.